Good morning, everybody. How's it going? My name is John. This is Making Shapes Yoga. Of Making Shapes Yoga. I am currently studying, and restudying, if that is a thing, the Samkhya Karika, and we are on verse 4. I'm going to go back to verse 3 at some point. That's for sure. It's verse 3 is wildly expansive. And we have to get somewhere down the road to better understand it, that's for sure. So I did part 1, part 2. I'm going to double back and have like a kind of conclusion to verse 3 in the future. Right now we have verse 4. The means of right cognition are recognized to be of 3 kinds: perception, inference, and valid testimony, as all the means of right cognition are proved to be included in these 3. Verily, a provable is proved by means of right cognition. Okay, so how do we figure a thing out, right? It's like, how do we figure a thing out? How do we know a thing is right or not? And that is in any philosophical system, we're trying to get to a point where we know a thing to be true enough that it then becomes useful to the overall methodology of that system. So the thing with right cognition, and I do believe Patanjali kind of is a little bit more expansive on this, where the very first thing we have to do is recognize the fact that the potential to misperceive a thing is quite great. Right? So we have perception, inference, and valid testimony. These are the ways to right cognition, right? So let's take care of number 2 and 3. All right. So inference, right? We meditate upon a thing. We kind of clearly study something, a certain subject, and we apply those studies to something that we experience in the world. So, in applying those studies, though, we have perceived through our own understanding of something. And in doing so, we automatically can't get to the core of it. In many ways, this is like a really beautiful idea. To know that there is no absolute way to fully, completely understand a thing. Right? There's no way in which we can fully understand a thing. And understanding is such an important part of philosophy, obviously. But it's in the acceptance of not being able to fully understand a thing, where we set aside our past experiences and do our very best to understand the materials put before us, right? Because we're looking at something, we're reading something, or maybe we're just out in the world having an experience. And without us knowing it, right, subconsciously, we end up filtering through the reality of what's going on based on some past experience or some past knowledge. So we don't really see the world as it unfolds as much as we see the world we want to see, right? Or maybe it's the world that we have seen. So this poses a really big problem. And this is why philosophy is so awesome, quite honestly, right? So the problem is, again, the reality of what's going on is interpreted by our own past experiences. And in doing so, we don't see as clearly as we possibly can. So we're trying to make, our own perceptions as clear as possible. So we can see, hear, smell, touch, and whatever the last one is, taste. Sure, taste. Yes, yeah, definitely. Right, right. We go in. It's like going to a restaurant. Here we go. It's a pretty good metaphor, right? We go into a restaurant and we have ordered a dish in the past, and we expect it to be a certain way, right? So we reorder that thing, and maybe it doesn't live up to something that we have experienced in the past. But maybe it's the same exact dish. Maybe it is made the same exact way. But our experience in the past was incredibly fulfilling. And, there are other factors that need to be kind of put into place. Our emotional state at that moment may have been different than it is in the current state. And therefore, what we are tasting now can be slightly different than what we had tasted in the past. So, right cognition comes from perception. It comes from inference and valid testimony, right? When we infer a thing, it's based a lot off of what we've experienced in the past. Valid testimony, right? This requires great trust in somebody and their understanding of it. And this is probably one of the most beautiful things in any subject, is to find that teacher that you can really trust. And it takes some time for us to reach that place. To get to know a person enough that what it is that they might be teaching is something maybe that they're passionate about, that they apply in their own lives. So when it comes to valid testimony, right, we just don't want to put it out there like, hey, this is this person said this. What do you know about that person, right? And I really do feel as though you need to know that person on a very personal level. Okay. Well, and then of course perception, which I touched on in that inference section there, right? Because our organs of perception are going to augment, right? So we have the mind filtering through what the organs of perception are receiving from the outside world. So, when it comes to the mind, is where we have that kind of inference kind of coming into play here. The mind is going to kind of change things to better suit its, what it has experienced in the past, right? So that it can better understand that thing. Clearing that docket out is quite difficult. So that the mind can see as clearly as possible. Whew, that is very, very difficult to do. All right, so, and remember that the organs of perception are also faulty, right? We can see this in the fact that many of us lose some degree of our ability to see clearly. All right, so a lot of us end up having to wear glasses, or get that surgery, or contacts or something like that. And the same is true for feeling. I was just thinking this the other day. I had this crazy cut on my finger. My old dominant, my right hand index finger's taken some major abuse the past 2 or 3 weeks. It's banged up, cut up, a couple different places too. So and of course I went to culinary school. I like to cook a lot, so my hands, my hands they get burnt now and again. They get burnt, so we end up losing some feeling as well, right, in our hands. And the other day, does anybody ever do this? I love this. Just as like a silly meditation. Take your fingers, do so very lightly. And I was telling my daughter about this. Just it feels kind of good. And that's the thing, right? Is that I might be losing my feeling and stuff, but at the same time, oh, so subtle. Anyway, my apologies for getting sidetracked there. We end up losing some feeling as well. So, yeah, those organs of perception are faulty. You're right. They're great tools to have. They are tools that were built around what is going on in nature. This is where I can become maybe a little indignant in the way I see human biology in the world, right? It's a two-way street. So the formation of us is based largely around, if not completely, I would say completely, around our environment, right? Those tools are specific to the environment in which we evolved in. Okay, so right cognition, right? And it's not just, it's not just being right. Right? I think I wrote that in the description, right? Being right is not good enough because we have to set aside that um, inclination to be right and that's what it is. No, things are always constantly changing and evolving, right? And our understanding of something might change and evolve over time. It's almost like every little bit of information that you get, you want to kind of tuck it away. Right? Leave it back there somewhere. Allow it to do its thing. Someday it might resurface and be an important part of the experience you're about to have. And then that thing might change a little bit based off of that experience and your own growth. So, thank you so much for joining me today for thoughts on the Samkhya Karika. I really appreciate it. Be sure to, take care of yourself and take care of others. Peace, everybody.